This is the Prosperity Podcast. This is the podcast of the South Island Prosperity Partnership. We are the Economic Development Alliance, private-public partnership made up of elected First Nations and municipal governments, private business, post-secondaries, business associations. And we're going to talk today about a place in the world that has gone through some economic recovery fairly recently and is facing that same thing that we are here in Greater Victoria. Wendy Stark is the Manager of Business Retention and Expansion for the Windsor Essex County Economic Development Corporation in Windsor, Ontario. Hi, Wendy.
Hi, Bruce. How are you?
Good, thank you. I'm going to begin this by acknowledging that I'm located in the traditional unceded territories of the Lekwungen-speaking people of the Songhees and the Esquimalt nations, who have been the stewards of this land for millennia. And Wendy, we're talking with you because Windsor and Essex is basically the automotive capital of Canada. And when things went downhill in 07 and 08, that was the time when the big three automakers had to go through the bailout process to stay alive. How's it going right now in your economy?
Well, there are some disturbing parallels to that time in our history, unfortunately, main thing being the unemployment rate. So that's, it's troubling. We went through a good couple of years where we had the highest unemployment rate in Canada fairly consistently. We are, again, last month and this month, highest unemployment rate in Canada. So that's, not a good parallel we want to see with 12 years ago. But there are some positive things that we can see, though, that sort of mitigate that bad number.
Is there a fairly recent estimate as to what your unemployment rate is?
Yeah, so we're at the Windsor Census Metropolitan Area for April was 12.9%. So in comparison, in February, it was 5.7%. Wow. So quite a dramatic increase. So in February, we were kind of middle of the way in the Census Metropolitan areas across Canada, and jumped quite a bit. But keeping in mind that our largest employer, which is FCA with the Windsor Assembly Plant, is currently shut down. So that's 6,000 people that are currently not working. We also have two plants for Ford Motor Company, which are also currently not working, and their direct suppliers are also shut down.
I just want to mention right now, too, that I've actually lived in Windsor, Ontario. I lived there part-time for a number of years and full-time for about 2.5 years, just before I located here. And I have deep family roots in Windsor, Essex, and I know very much the kind of community that you are. So before we get back into the business part, Windsor has always struck me as being one of the kindest and most considerate places that I've ever lived. Mm-hmm. I always referred to Windsor as a community that wore its heart on its sleeve. So how does the community react when times like this come along?
Well, certainly there are many groups that are helping each other out, that are providing support and providing meals. Numerous businesses are providing meals for first responders and for frontline nursing staff and so on. It's really been, we really do feel like we're all in it together. We're all supporting one another. We're celebrating these types of things where people are giving of their time and opening their wallets, and we certainly do appreciate that. A small example of that on a business basis, though, was we were contacted by Windsor Regional Hospital a couple of weeks ago with a need for a manufacturer to step up and do some assembly on some face shields that were donated to them but couldn't be used as they were. Within less than 24 hours, I had more than 12 companies stand up and say, we'll help them out, 25,000 face shields, we'll do it for free. So it's really been wonderful to see, and a lot of these things don't get publicized, but it's wonderful for us to see.
Yeah, there's been some exceptional outreach here too, with people helping each other. Mm-hmm. So to go back to the economy, so in 07-08, Windsor Essex would have realized that the automotive sector was at risk, and the role that it plays in your economy was at risk, because what percentage of your employees are engaged either in the auto business itself or the supply chain?
Well, we'll say percentage-wise, I can't. We've got about 13,500 people out of a workforce of, say, 185,000 people are automotive or automotive parts suppliers. Then we have an additional about 7,000 people that work in the machine tool, die, and mold sector. And those are really probably 90% automotive focused. So I would say about something more than half of the manufacturing workforce is automotive and automotive related. We also do have a lot of food processing in the area as well, other types of manufacturing outside of automotive, but that is still the mainstay.
Yeah, you're actually the Canadian home of Green Giant, as I recall. That's something that happens in and around
Yeah,
Windsor Essex.
Green Giant. They're now Bondwell, so owned by a French company. But yep, they are still there.
So some of the differences between our economies, we're going to come back to the similarities shortly, but yours is a manufacturing-based economy where a lot of that stuff goes on. That's high-tech, regular manufacturing, and you're surrounded by fields. We're on an island where the manufacturing that we do is very advanced manufacturing. It's very, very specialized, and we do not have a lot of farmland here. So in that sense, we're at a bit of a risk because we're on an island. But the common thing that we want to talk about here is the recovery that you looked at in 07 and 08. So the auto sector itself tried to make a bit of a shift. Tell me about that. And Wendy is frozen. She's in an area that has sort of unstable connectivity. So we're going to maybe get Wendy to turn off her video and we'll do just audio too.
Okay, can you hear me?
Hi, there we go. Okay.
There we go. Okay.
So the shift, the shift away from that economy in 07, 08.
Yeah, so I mean, yes and no. From an economic development perspective, and I should say, first of all, that my job was a little bit different. I was with the organization in 07, 08. My job was a little bit different. At that time, I was a little bit more focused on business attraction rather than retention. But as a corporation, I mean, we've always tried to promote diversification. Just in terms of having a stable economy and not being so beholden to the automotive industry, which is very feast or famine. So we've always tried to get companies to look at diversification in their customer base and in their geographical markets. So this is what we did with more intensity in 07 and 08, and with the companies paying a little bit more attention. I mean, it's very hard to sell the idea of moving away from this customer base that's been so positive for you and so lucrative. But let's look at this other industry which you have no experience in and no background in and really no knowledge of. It's a bit of a hard sell. So during that time when automotive was so challenging, was a little bit easier to get companies to consider something else. So we did do that. We examined other geographical markets which they might sell into, both in terms of the actual part suppliers and the equipment and mold and die manufacturers. To look at different geographical markets, to look at other types of industries that they could service, such as aerospace, such as defense, such as, ironically, medical devices. So these are things that we promoted, and we developed programming around that to help them see what would be involved in switching that focus.
So yeah, medical devices, you had mentioned that. You and I had a little chat before we did this podcast too. So some of them did go into that field, but if I recall correctly, they then started to migrate back into the sector where they had been before and migrated back into automotive. Is that kind of what happened?
Yeah, I mean, to a large extent. So a few different things happen. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of the tool die and mold sector, and I should explain, I'm not sure how familiar people will be with that sector. So when I say mold, it's usually plastic injection molds that would be used by an auto parts manufacturer to make the parts. But they can honestly be used to make anything. We have a company here that all they do is make molds to do containers, like pails and buckets and so on. So a mold can be used for anything that's plastic. And then when I say die, it's usually a stamping die. So if you're stamping a metal part. But again, they can be used to make things that are not automotive. But that's what they know. I mean, automotive is what they know. And so when that started to recover, when the auto industry started to come back, it was hard to sort of get these companies to stick with these new types of clients that they were maybe still not quite sure of. But some of them did. And another thing that we did at the time was to really push companies to, even if they're automotive, limit your exposure to the automotive industry. So don't have 90% or 95% of your customer base in the automotive industry. The more successful companies and the more stable companies we see will limit their exposure to 30% or 40% to automotive, and then do other things. And medical devices was a little bit more of a challenge, but we do have companies that make molds and parts for things like recreational vehicles, for consumer goods, household goods, so anything outside of automotive is is good to balance your base.
Yeah, I mean, just next time you get in your car, anybody, take a look around you and see how much of the pieces of things that are around you are made of plastic. They all would have been formed or molded in one of these facilities that Wendy is talking about. Wendy is with the Windsor Essex County Economic Development Organization, as in Windsor, Ontario. So what's the conversation now, Wendy, with, again, the auto sector is being challenged by this, by its go forward. At one point, there was a move toward electrifying car manufacturing. Maybe that's being put on hold now. The price of gas has made people realize that maybe the evolution over into an electric or a zero emission vehicle might now be delayed because of the affordability factor of oil and gas. Does that come up in conversation much? Yeah,
so in terms of electrification, I mean, really that's less, my understanding of it is it's less consumer driven than it's sort of a top down thing. So that, it's mandates from the government. So the OEMs, the original equipment manufacturers, are required to have a certain portion of their product line be electric, which is, it's a challenge because it kind of, if nobody wants to buy them, it's hard for them to justify making them, and frequently they make them at a loss. So that's a challenge. However, I mean, there are opportunities as well. So like I say, our main employer is Fiat Chrysler Automobiles, FCA Canada, and with their Windsor assembly plant, which is the largest assembly facility in Canada, employing 6,000 people, a portion of that fleet will be electric. So they have a plug-in hybrid version of that model. So, so that is still happening. I don't know that would change. I know that gas prices are quite low right now, but I don't know that would have a long-term effect on the electrification of vehicles. And then looking at the tool, die, and mold sector, they tend to benefit when there are more frequent model changes. So every time you change a model, you change what the interior of the car looks like, and then you need a new mold. Or the exterior of the vehicle, then you need a new stamping die for how your fender is going to look, and so on. So model changes are what's important to them. And moving into electric, I mean, that will, sort of good and bad. They will need new molds because of the different look of your dash, but there won't be as much variety from vehicle to vehicle if there are no knobs and things, if it's all sort of in one piece, or if it's all on a touch screen, then there's less variety.
I know that renewable energy has been a part of the economic landscape there too, that I believe through your provincial government. Is that right?
Yes, so that was another thing that sort of came up at the same time as the recession, and I'm sure it was an effort to combat the economic downturn. But the provincial government developed their Renewable Energy Act, which incentivized the production of solar and wind energy. We are very flat in this area, so we are very windy. We do get a lot of sun, and the provincial government paid a substantial amount for the energy that was generated through these sources. So that incentivized international companies to look at our area in particular, because we are so close to the US, to establish manufacturing facilities around solar and wind power generation. So we had a number of companies set up, and a couple of them actually, a couple of companies diversified out of what they were doing originally into either racking systems or solar panel manufacturing or something around renewable energy generation. So that was sort of a timely opportunity for us.
So let's talk about where you go from here. What's being talked about? What's being planned? Is there a recovery plan in place right now to create recovery from this circumstance and then establish resilience going forward? Tell me about some of those conversations.
Right. So, and again, there are some similarities with what was implemented in 07, 08, 09. I say 09, really, our worst unemployment was in 2009. But a lot of what we're doing now is similar to then. So establishing a task force to oversee this whole process, to have a subcommittee for the various industries within the economy that are important to us. So manufacturing, obviously, agribusiness, we have the largest greenhouse vegetable cluster in Canada and the US is in Leamington.
Yes.
And that's a huge economic driver as well. So we have a committee for that, tourism, professional services, and hospitality. So we have the various committees that have been struck, and we meet weekly, and sort of taking the pulse of those industries and seeing how everybody is doing. But in manufacturing in particular, we're really hoping to capitalize on our company's ability to pivot and to make COVID-related items, to make face shields, to make intubation boxes. There's various products that our companies are coming up with. We have a list of somewhere over 50 local companies that are making COVID-related items, which is great to see. Some of it's public, and some of it is just we happen to have been talking to them. And we know of about 20 that are intending to continue manufacturing these types of products going forward. So we definitely want to, and are planning to, devise ways to support that. And to incent more companies to look at that opportunity.
Yeah, certainly medical supplies is seen as an opportunity, which you have to try and identify. Technology is another huge opportunity, which I guess in the manufacturing sector relates to everything from automation to the programming of that automation and that sort of thing too. Another thing, just before we wrap this up here, Wendy, from living in Windsor Essex for a period of time, I know that it's a very rich multicultural area. I think in the time when I lived there, it was said that you could do business in over 80 different languages because of the great diversity that's within your economy. Migration is going to look different for the next little while. What do you think that's going to do to your workforce?
Yeah, and actually that's where we've had a lot of population growth. And actually now going back to the number of languages, we do now say over 100 languages.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and we've really, that's how we've population growth is much more from international migration than from interprovincial or intra-provincial. So, we do still see multiculturalism as being a huge advantage to our area, and going forward, I don't see that changing. It's really been a consistent area of growth for us, and certainly the fact that we are so multicultural just encourages more of it. So just knowing how welcoming we are. We have a festival every summer, except for probably this summer.
Yeah.
It's called Carousel of the Nations, and we'll have maybe 20 or more different exhibits of dancing and food and entertainment and socialization for various ethnic groups. And just recently we started to have this same festival spill over into Leamington. So Leamington is where we have the greenhouses. It's got a large population of migrant workers, so that adds to the diversity in that area. So certainly something to continue to be celebrated.
Yeah, that was one of the greatest times of year to be in Windsor, because you would look, it was like 2 weeks and you'd get a passport and you would go to the Slavic hall, and the next night to the Italian hall, the next night to the Mandarin hall, and you'd have all this food and the music and learn more about the culture. And it was so fantastic.
Yeah, and it's not widely known, I think, outside of this area, but we're the fourth most ethnically diverse community in Canada. And so considering that the others are very large metropolitan areas, and we are, Windsor Essex County is about 400,000 people. So we're not huge, but we certainly have a diverse population, which we love to celebrate.
Yeah, so you're about the same size as our region. One other thing in closing too, I believe Windsor still has the busiest border crossing in the world, which is the commerce and all the business that goes across between Windsor and Detroit on the Ambassador Bridge. So much so that they're twinning it and building another bridge, naming it after my sports hero, Gordie Howe, who played for the Detroit Red Wings for a long time. What's traffic across the border like now?
Yeah, it is down. So it's the busiest commercial crossing between Canada and the US. So it's not the busiest crossing in North America because there's a crossing in between the US and Mexico that is incredible.
Okay.
But it is down because, so even the truck traffic is down because a lot of the truck traffic was for automotive. So certainly in some sectors it's up, and we do have I missed this when we were speaking earlier, but we do have a logistics and transportation subcommittee of our task force as well, because that is a big sector of our economy being at the border. But a lot of what is going across is automotive and parts. We have a very integrated supply chain between Windsor and Detroit. Parts cross on average to go into a minivan 7 times. They cross the border before the minivan is actually built. But this traffic could continue because the border is open to trade, but because the plants have been shut down, it's been down. The plants, both Ford and FCA, are due to start opening back up next week. So hopefully it'll be a gradual opening, just one shift at a time. But that'll get things moving again. One thing I did want to mention, though, and I sort of missed this earlier when we were talking about supporting different sectors and going forward, is we do also have a large automation sector here. So some of this was in place at 07, 08, but it really grew a lot in the past decade or so. Those types of companies, again, can supply any industry. So another thing that we're working on is trying to connect the automation companies locally to, in particular, our greenhouse sector and other types of opportunities where they can diversify their customer base outside of automotive. But this is a big strength. We've also, in the years since, been successful in establishing an association of automation companies, which is based in Windsor Essex. It is a Canada-wide association, but the majority of the members are here at this point. So that's something that we've done in the intervening years to support diversification in the economy.
Cool. Yeah. So when automotive takes a hit, you feel it. When tourism takes a hit, we feel it, and we have in a big way here in this region. It's been devastating, actually, what's happened. Wendy, I like your optimism. I really appreciate the time you've taken to speak with us today. And as we move through all of this, we will keep in touch and see how it does go for the folks in Windsor Essex, and we'll let you know how it's going out here on Vancouver Island too.
Great, turning my camera back on. Great.
There we go. Just to say goodbye, Wendy Stark is the Manager of Business Retention and Expansion for the Windsor Essex County Economic Development Organization, and she was you're not right in Windsor, are you? You're in.
Do I live in Windsor? No, I live in Essex County in Channel Lakeshore. So I'm looking at, you look at water, but I'm looking at a farm field across the street from my house right now.
Great. Well, stay well, Wendy, and thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Wendy, what's your website if people want to find out more?
ChooseWindsorEssex.com.
Cool. One word, ChooseWindsorEssex.com. Great, thank you. We, of course, are SouthIslandProsperity.ca. If you'd like to reach out to us, do that through our website. If you want to reach me, my email address is on there too. Thanks again to Wendy Stark. I'm Bruce Williams, and this has been the Prosperity Podcast.